Let's go, LSU football fans. I know you're feeling good about Trevonte Citizen, but we have to look at what's next for LSU recruiting because they have two huge announcements coming up. We'll get to that in a second. And you look here, LSU nationally ranked fourth class, number one in the SEC. Are you kidding me? So obviously LSU is looking pretty good right now. And because of Trevonte Citizen committing, their number is currently at 15. Okay, so why is that number very relevant? Well, the number means something completely different than what it did 2 years ago. So 15 is a very important number because the amount of slots you have in each class is 25. So that's the thing. You want to make sure you have at least, in my opinion, 3 slots remaining at the end of this class. So your hard commit when it comes to high school prospects, instead of 25, think of that number as 22 because you want to have at least 3 spots left for the transfer portal. Now, why is those 3 slots so important? Well, you look at LSU, they use their 2 final slots on transfer portal guys, Mike Jones and Major Burns, but it would be very nice if they still had 1 more slot remaining because Dare Rosenthal left and LSU has a huge hole in their offensive line depth, and it would be very nice to attempt to get an offensive lineman in the portal going into this next season. So I think LSU, at the end of all of this, is going to have at least 1 slot remaining going into next season just to have more flexibility. So I think LSU is going to do that moving forward because we've seen schools like Georgia and Kentucky take advantage of getting some elite players off our team, and they still had room to do so, whereas LSU, if they wanted to do that right now, they simply can't because they already hit their hard number of 25 recruits. So if the number is currently at 15, what we know now is in the next couple of weeks, 2 major LSU targets will be making their announcement. Emery Jones, who we talked about a bunch on this channel, one of the elite offensive linemen in the state of Louisiana, and to me, my number 1 uncommitted target for LSU. He will be making an announcement on July 30th. And then Shawn Murphy, a top 100 linebacker out of Virginia, will be making his announcement on August 1st. Let's just say LSU lands both of them. Emery Jones looks to be the more likely. I also think that they will land Shawn Murphy, and that will make their number be 17, okay? So this is what you have to do with recruiting. Not everyone that is currently committed is going to be a part of this class. So you're looking at, and you probably already seen this in this video, you're looking at all the names here. The guys at the bottom of this list, I think outside of Nathan Dilbert, there is an opportunity or a possibility that these guys will not be a part of this class, whether that be LSU not wanting them anymore or them just not wanting to go to LSU anymore. These things happen, and we've said this in every recruiting video. I do see a wave of decommitments coming simply because prospects last season couldn't make official visits to stadiums, and I think that will be another wrench into this equation as we go through all this time of change with NIL and transfer portal and all of this and that. Let's say one of the guys that you just saw does not become a part of this LSU class. So let's put the number just at a very soft estimate of 16 commits after Murphy and Jones commit, okay? So 16, then you go to the top prospects in Louisiana. We've heard LSU recruiting staff, like Mason Smith, tweet this out, that they are looking to really lock up the state of Louisiana and that they're not done yet in the state of Louisiana. So let's just say Shaz Preston commits to LSU. That then puts them at 17 commits. Let's say they flip Le'Veon Moss, or let's just, for right now, say that they don't flip Le'Veon Moss. We go down to Kendrick Law, that puts him at 18. Jamon Tapp puts him at 19. Quincy Wiggins puts him at 20. Okay, let's just say one of those guys doesn't end up going to LSU. Let's put it back at 19. And then you get down here to Austin Osbury. I do think he'll be a part of this class, so now we are back to 20. And then you have some really good 3-star prospects like JaVale Gilmore, like Shawn Washington. Are they a part of this class? We don't know. So let's just say one of those guys commits, and we are still at that number 20. Now, once again, we only want to take 22 people because obviously in my humble estimation, I would like to see LSU have at least 3 slots remaining for the transfer portal next season. And we get to hear the 5 stars, all right? So Walter Nolan, Jamar Stewart, Denver Harris, Devon Campbell, Harold Perkins, Amari Obor, and Evan Stewart. These are all 5 stars that have links to LSU. Some are stronger than others. Let's just say LSU lands one of them. That puts the number at 21. And then you get down here to a guy that I like a lot, Azariah Thomas. That then puts you at 22. But here's the problem, right? There's still all these guys down here. All right, yeah, Malik Agbo. What if he wants to be a part of this class? What if Kamari Wilson decides, hey, I want to go be a part of DBU? So there are some other names. Anthony Lucas, who is a top 100 lineman, the number 1 player in Arizona. What if he wants to be a part of this class? He's had some ties to LSU. He's made a recent visit. So you see how difficult the numbers can be. That's why I think, especially if LSU has a really good season, that'll get more elite 4s and high-level 5s very interested in coming to LSU. Julian Armella, who is just a phenomenal offensive line prospect out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida, St. Thomas Aquinas High School. LSU was able to get Marcus Dumerville out of there a few years ago. And then, of course, you have Cam Dewberry, who's been linked to LSU. So, this list goes on and on and on of potential elite prospects that LSU might be able to get here at the end. So, these numbers are definitely not set at all. So as much as I like recruiting, what we're about to talk about here about SEC Media Days is way more important than any other recruit. I believe Dan Mullen, and I know he's not an LSU coach, said the most important thing about LSU yesterday regarding the permanent cross-division rival rule in the SEC.
I'd love this to maybe do away with the permanent crossover team, and so you get these type of games more often. I think for the players, for the fan bases, I really think it's exciting to see some more of maybe mixing up the teams from the West and playing 2 different teams each year instead of a permanent crossover. I think that'd be really exciting because so you get this matchup. So it's going to be an exciting day. It's going to be a great atmosphere. It's going to be a fun game to be a part of. And as you said, for 10 years we haven't seen it. You'd love to see that more. I mean, there's teams that'll visit. There's non-conference teams that are going to visit the Swamp a lot more than conference teams. And I think you would love to see maybe a better rotation of those teams.
So yeah, it's important to discuss and differentiate what you like and what is fair. I love the fact that LSU and Florida play every season. I love the vitriol that's come from it, whether it's the shoe throw or the Tebow games or whatever. It has become so organic, the hatred these 2 fan bases have for each other. And obviously, geographically, we're not close to Gainesville by any stretch of the imagination, and vice versa. And, when you think of traditional rivalries, Florida is not one of LSU's top rivals, and LSU is not one of Florida's top rivals for sure. It's not good for LSU that this permanent cross-division rival rule is still set in place. Now, if you have been following my work, even pre this channel, you know how passionate I am about this subject. Now, Ed Orgeron commented yesterday, and he said, I'm going to play whoever is on my schedule, which is obviously a good mentality to have. But I'm glad Dan Mullen said this because it does need to be changed, because this is obviously hurting LSU. And even going back to Les and Joe Oliva, they kept bringing this up as well. It is very unfair that LSU, that plays an SEC West schedule, has to play a team that's been really good for well over a decade now, where LSU's 2 top rivals moving forward, Texas A&M and Alabama, they get to play South Carolina and Tennessee respectively. And neither of those teams have really been able to stay close to the Aggies or Alabama in recent history. Texas A&M and South Carolina have been cross-division rivals. The Gamecocks have not beaten Texas A&M, and it's been, since the Gettysburg Address, since they've basically been Vanderbilt, since Tennessee has really come close to Alabama. So, yeah, it's not great at all that LSU has to overcome this obstacle of playing Florida every season. And honestly, if you're an Auburn fan, shout out to Vernon. He's a supporter of the channel. The same thing's kind of true for Auburn because they have to play Georgia every season on top of their tumultuous SEC West schedule. So Alabama and Texas A&M, it's better for them for the rule to stay in place because it gives them such a huge advantage. And the reason why it's so important, because in college football, more so than pretty much any other sport you can think of, your regular season matters more than anything else. And the most important thing you need to do in college football is not recruit, it's not, win, it's honestly not winning, it's avoiding losses. Losses is what cost you the college football playoff, not necessarily wins, okay? You can have a schedule where you don't win against a whole lot of elite teams, but if you only lose one game or no games at all, you could still get into a college football playoff. But if you have 2 losses, guess what? You're more than likely not going to get in. And if you have more losable games on your schedule, we can all agree that Florida is a way more losable game than Tennessee or South Carolina. That is a huge disadvantage for LSU. Now, if you're still not convinced, let me remind you that schedule changes take years in advance. Like, they don't just happen overnight. And I want to show you why it's so important to get on this now. So, obviously, a lot of you are super high on Walker Howard, right? He's going to be a 2022 commit. Probably won't become the starter until 2023 or 2024. I want to fast forward to the 2025 schedule, okay? So this could be the prime year of Walker Howard. He's either going to be a junior or senior at this point. So this schedule you're currently looking at in 2025 is according to fbschedules.com, and I'm using this as an example to show you how difficult things can be if the cross-division rival rule is not in your favor. So the one thing we know for sure is LSU will play a home-and-home against Clemson in 2025 and 2026, which is cool. But take a look at the rest of the schedule. Once again, this is according to fbschedules.com. On top of playing at Clemson, this just also happens to be the year that you draw the game at Sanford Stadium against Georgia in Georgia, obviously. And that is a matchup that only happens once every 6 years, and you only visit the stadium once out of every 12 years. So LSU gets very unlucky that by far the toughest non-conference game that they have probably ever scheduled at Dabo's Place in Clemson just happens to fall in with the same year that you draw the most difficult SEC non-cross-division permanent rival matchup you possibly can at Georgia, right? So that obviously stinks a lot because on top of that, you still have to play your normal schedule, which is Alabama, Arkansas. By the way, at Bryant-Denny as well, but you also have Arkansas, Auburn, Florida, Texas A&M, Mississippi State, and at Ole Miss. So you have 1, 2, 3 top 5 recruiters, 4, 5, 6 top 10 recruiters, all on the same schedule. Where you look at Alabama's schedule, their SEC matchups include Tennessee and Missouri, plus their non-conference matchup, and that one is Florida State. So you tell me if that's fair or not. It is not fair. So obviously, things are going to be different here in a few years. We're going to have a 12-team playoff, but still, this is a murderer's row, and in order for this to change, you've got to get the ball rolling as far as this is concerned. Now, imagine being, obviously, this schedule would be really fun from just an LSU fan perspective, but this is not the NFL, okay? This is not just any other sport. Your losses have a huge impact on what you could potentially do in the postseason. Boom! Shout out to Roger, loyal PHLer. He was the one that hooked me up with this advocate. I actually didn't have one from this glorious moment in LSU football history. And look, this is what we want. We want to get back to this moment, and it's never guaranteed. It's really hard to do so, especially in the Southeastern Conference. And I know that so much can change from now until 2024, 2025. Obviously, we're in a state of flux right now in college football in general, so lots of things obviously will change until 2025, but it's also very feasible that it doesn't, right? We still could be in this 8-game conference schedule and silly cross-division rival rule then, and that's the funny thing about this, right? It's very plausible that things stay the same way. Now, in the top right corner of your screen, we actually talked about this, and there was a report from a personal friend of mine that is a very prominent SEC media member, and that the SEC has already been discussing changing up the schedule format after, the 10-game experiment last year. So if you want to watch that, I'll link it down below as well. But it is very fascinating. And you also have to answer this question as well. What is in the best interest of the SEC? And honestly, the answer to that is to keep everything the same, because right now the SEC has basically been at the forefront of every college football playoff. They have the most national champions. I think they're the only conference with multiple national champions in the college football playoff format. So it's very interesting because unless you actually push change, nothing will actually change, even though so much is changing in this sport. So in a few years, obviously, I do believe we'll be in a 12-team playoff format. So with that tough 2025 schedule, it will be a little bit easier to get into the playoffs. So that obviously helps, but it still doesn't make it any less fair that LSU has to play such a far more difficult schedule than Alabama does that season because of the way the permanent cross-division rival rule works itself out. Now, it is very fascinating because Walker Howard might not even be the quarterback then. He could start 2023 and 2024 and be the number 1 overall pick. But even then, that doesn't matter because that is exactly essentially what happened when LSU won the national championship in 2007. They lost a number 1 overall quarterback the very next year from Jamarcus Russell to Matt Flynn. They were still able to win the title. So that obviously doesn't change a whole lot in that aspect of the argument as well. But I do think Walker Howard will be the quarterback in 2025. I think Nuss a few years there. Max could still be the quarterback up until 2024 as well. But it is really fascinating how, so much can change, but nothing will change unless, of course, you bring it up. And I know it's so far ahead and we have so many other years, but that's the thing. It takes years for this change, for the logistics and the scheduling and all of that to actually happen. But that's why you're on this channel, because we talk about LSU football deeply and outside the box. So obviously, if this is your first time and you're confused by anything we talked about in this video, the comment section is always open. And as always, our live streams are always very open discussions where you can ask me and everyone in the chat anything you want, and obviously we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. Boom! Obviously, there's some cool content floating in your face if you want to keep this party moving. It is Power Hour LSU. Boom! We're doing more chicken wings tonight. Let's go!